Class is in session once again here at the Apartment Academy, the multifamily industry's only operations-focused podcast and your institute for higher NOI. I'm your host, the Dean of the Apartment Academy, Daniel Cunningham, and today's guest lecturer is Devin Harvey. Devin is the Senior Director of Business Services at Pegasus Residential. And let me tell you something, if you have been considering adopting new technology in your organization, or you're in the midst of doing so, today's podcast is a blueprint for how you go about that process in a way that will allow you to make good decisions about which technology provider you're going to be using and to get great adoption once you've made that decision. Two important things that so many people fumble through if you've not been through it. Pegasus does this right. You're going to be excited to hear what he has to say. Let's bring him on. All right, Professor Harvey, welcome to the Apartment Academy, the institution for higher NOI. This is Lecture Hall 101. We're all yours today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Great. Well, awesome. Thank you. Where do we find you today? Where are you actually physically?
I am in Alpharetta, Georgia. It's a suburb of Atlanta.
You are the Senior Director of Business Services for Pegasus. Pegasus Residential. Would you mind, just for the folks that are listening, give me some sense of who Pegasus is, size, geographic focus, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So Pegasus Residential was founded in 2009. We are an all women-owned organization. We currently have around 155 properties, around 45,000 units. Our geographic footprint is currently in the Southeast. However, we are expanding into the North as well as over to the West as well.
Awesome, thank you. And you have, as I was saying to you before we started, you have the classic come up through the ranks story that I love for people to share. Would you mind talking a little bit about how you got into the business, the kind of roles that you've had that have led to you with this role at Pegasus?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I landed in multifamily by happenstance. I had a friend of mine. Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people came into the industry. But I had a friend of mine that in high school said, "Hey, I think you'd be really great in this industry." She actually worked in the industry. So she sent over my name to a property manager in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I'm from. And they interviewed me, and I became a part-time leasing consultant there. And then worked my way up from there to be assistant manager, property manager. I was a multi-site manager. I worked in the corporate side in marketing and sales. I also worked back on site, like with a high rise. And then I came back over to Pegasus for marketing. And then I have moved into this business services role. We actually created that department about 2.5 years ago.
Cool. And that's really kind of what we're going to talk about today is, why is there a business services role? What is it that role does? And how important is the role and what you represent in an organization, certainly the size of Pegasus, but really just broadly as multifamily becomes a more sophisticated, technically adept industry, what you're doing there is going to be more important to other folks in the industry. So this is going to be a great show. Why don't let's talk a little bit about, let's start out talking about just the challenges of adopting technology, first of all. I mean, we've not been an industry known for being on the steep end of the adoption curve. I think that's probably still true today. But there is a changing of the guard. There is more acceptance and acknowledgement that technology is required to really be proficient at what we do and reduce risk and increase NOI, all these sort of things. But it's not as easy as that, right? It's not as you must probably get 100 emails a day from people trying to sell you something, want you to adopt some new product, right? So let's start with, what are the challenges in assessing, identifying, adopting technology?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest challenges is there's so much technology on the market. So I think the first problem comes in just trying to figure out, what is going to work best, and also what do I need to focus on as an organization. I mean, I know for us, one of our big things is that our whole strategy and goal is to make our associates' lives easier. And so in order to do that, we have to adopt technology that really focuses on automation, AI, data aggregates like a business intelligence tool, and also like a project management CRM type of tool. So that's kind of what our main focus has been, is to really do that. I think that some of the other biggest challenges with adoption of new technology is, up until COVID, I would say that our industry was definitely lagging behind on a lot of the technological advances. I will say that I think COVID really pushed us as an industry to start embracing new technology. But what we found was that our workforce didn't necessarily want to embrace that new technology. And so we had to really get behind it, make sure that we were behind it from a strategic standpoint, but then also from like all of our executive team and our leaders in our company. We really had to go through and learn, what is the change management process? How does that work? We have 750 associates. And so trying to get everybody to do the same thing the same way, that can be a pretty difficult thing. Also, with technology, because we do have we have a very, very vast workforce with all different types of generations involved. It has been a little bit troublesome for us to try to figure out, what is the best technology for us to utilize that's really going to appeal to all of the generations that we have that work in our organization. I think the next thing was that we tend to really like new technology, and so we try to be on the forefront as a company for whatever is coming new into multifamily. And I think that what we did was we overloaded ourselves with technology and really tried to push a lot of products in a very short amount of time, which then, overburdened our teams. And so that's kind of where the whole idea of, business services was kind of grown out of that. But in particular, business services, there's one specific department underneath that called business improvement that actually oversees all of our corporate road mapping and project management within the organization.
So an organization the size of Pegasus has the luxury of delegating some of this to a business improvement group and then bumping that to a business services group. Is there a way for, what I'm going to ask is there a way for smaller operators to approximate what you guys are accomplishing there? Before we jump into that, why don't you talk about what that process looks like? So you mentioned a couple of things. You started with saying there's a lot of new technology out there, which there certainly is. And you guys love bright, shiny objects, it sounds like, which is great. But let's start with step one. How do you canvass the market for what the offerings are? And then how do you distill that down to the ones that you really evaluate? And then how do you really evaluate those and select?
Well, I think when we first started, we kind of just went for any new technology that we saw, right? But since then, we've kind of tailored that down to really make sure that we're backing into looking for providers based on the needs of the organization. What are our biggest pain points? And so that's one thing that we did, like with the process, is we have something called an idea worksheet. Anyone in the company can submit one of these if they think that they have an idea that would make our operations better or the company better as a whole. It's an online form. They go through, they fill it out. From there, it goes into our built team, which is our business improvement leadership team, who then takes a look at those ideas and all of our other projects, and we prioritize them. We make decisions on whether or not we're going to move forward with them. But I think one of the biggest things for us was really starting to lean on our, all of our associates to tell us what needed to happen, right? I think a lot of times at a lot of organizations, and I'm very lucky to work for an organization that really has an open door policy and wants to hear feedback from every level of the company. And I think that that's what we ended up doing really well, was allowing for, that groundskeeper on site to be able to submit an idea that really could change the company, all the way up to, our vice president and C-level being able to do the same thing and being able to have those conversations and listen to them.
Got it. So there's a groundswell through this idea submission of things that your teams in the field need. That then gets distilled down to, you called it pain points, the biggest pain points you want to solve. And then you use those pain points to then guide the technology that's how you prioritize the technology that you want to adopt.
And I think one of the big questions that we always ask is, in a perfect world, if you had a magic wand and you could make this, the easiest and best process or product that there is, what does that look like? And I think that's been a very helpful question to ask, because one, it really drives our people to think creatively, but then it also really pushes us to be able to then take all that feedback and really figure out if there is a product on the market that will do those things for us.
And then based on that process, you've selected a partner, a technology partner. You touched on something else, which is really, really hard, which is the change management piece. Even technology that comes from this grassroots canvassing of what do you need isn't necessarily then welcomed with open arms. In fact, not necessarily. I would say typically is not welcomed with open arms. People generally have problems with change. Folks in multifamily, maybe even more than most, really tend to resist change. So talk to us a little bit about how that process works. How do you successfully implement change management? How do you set the table for it? How do you implement it? And how do you follow up to make sure there's adoption?
Well, I think for setting the table, what we first have to do is we have to ensure that we have the correct project team backing the project, right? So a couple of the things that we assign when we're looking at a new project is something we call a project champion. And so that's the person that actually submitted the idea for us to make the change, right? Because that's going to be the biggest cheerleader for that project because it came from them. Then we also have the project manager, which is the person who is, in the day-to-day, in the weeds, making sure that all the tasks are being completed so that we can deliver the project on time and on budget for the company. And then the next piece would be the project team. All the members of the team, whether normally we have someone from the vast majority of our departments in the company that are involved, so that way that we hear everyone's voices and we have all of those voices at the table when we are doing the programming and making those decisions. I think that's probably the start of all of that. And then once you really have that group really outline and get them behind the project, I think it's then getting your C-level, your senior executive team really behind it and talking about it and getting excited about it with their associates. It's really making sure that you have a really clear communication plan. How often are you can't just send out one email and hope that that's going to be a change management, right? It's got to be bite-sized pieces over time. And truthfully, the biggest thing that the associates want to understand is what's in it for them. How is this going to make my life easier? Or how is this going to make my job security better, or my overall, happiness at my job better? They really want to understand what's in it for them. So I think that that's one thing that we really focus on, is making sure that we're very clear on, here's all the things that we're doing. Here's how these things affect you. Here's why we need you to support in these, because here's how you fit into the bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish.
And do you deliver that message via video? Is this something you in writing? Do you have meetings you talk about this? How do you communicate that message? What are the different modalities that you use?
Yes, we use quite a few different channels. So we, of course, use Microsoft Teams. So that's one channel that we would utilize. We also do a communication cadence, which is basically a daily huddle for all of our teams. So, all the teams meet every single day, only for 10 or 15 minutes, just to go through what are their projects that they're working on for the day, if there's anything that they need help with. But that's also where we would, send in some of that information. We also do one-on-ones and also team meetings. So all of those would be some of the channels that we utilize. We also do a quarterly town hall that's very similar to I would say like a View talk show. And so that's another channel that we utilize to really communicate any type of big changes that we're doing. And then, of course, all of the standard communication channels like email, and our online internet type of areas. And then we also will utilize just word of mouth. I think one of the big things that's also helpful is to make sure that you have champions that really believe in the project. And normally that's going to be your project team, but just having conversations, if they're having a conversation with someone out in the field about, let's just say that it's for instance, a business intelligence product, right? And they're talking to them about, they're having some reporting issues. It's a great time for them to say, hey, you know what's coming? I'm going to help you through this, but let me talk to you a little bit about what's coming so that we can get more people excited, more people bought in, and so they can actually see a use case where it's going to work well for them.
Yeah. Is there a general timeline you have in mind, like how long it takes from green light of a product to, let's call it launch, right? In order to facilitate all of these steps, what kind of time frame do you think is reasonable to allow for that?
Well, it actually varies based on the project, right? So if we were looking to do, for instance, an integration for like an HTML e-signatures for like email signatures, that project is a pretty easy project, right? Because we utilize Microsoft Azure with Active Directory, and so those things can kind of be set up. So that project would only take probably about a month. However, if you're working on, let's just say, a business intelligence product where you're bringing in all of the data points for all the software systems that you utilize today, and then developing dashboards and reporting metrics around those, that may take 6 months to a year. So I think it varies on what the project is, and that's another thing that we outline when we go through that whole process. So I talked a little bit about the project idea worksheet. So from the idea worksheet, once that's approved, we have a more in-depth worksheet that's called the charter worksheet, and that's where we work through some of the more granular details on what's the rollout schedule going to look like, what are the different risks that we may that may pop up while we're rolling this out, what are some things that we haven't thought about, do we have all the correct people involved, it gets really, really granular once you get to that level.
I gotta tell you, I had this other hat I wear, which is a CEO of a software company called Leonardo 24/7, and we have seen I've seen a lot of implementations over the years, and the concept that you just described, you called it a charter, yeah, it's so smart, and I have never seen that come from the client side ever before, and I want to spend a little time with this because I think the very best software in the world is going to not always behave exactly how you thought. It's not always going to function the way you expected. It might not accomplish the things you wanted to accomplish. And to think through the risks, what could go wrong? What are you really trying to achieve? Who should be making these decisions? I have seen implementations go wrong because the wrong person was guiding what the software should be doing. So really brilliant. Kudos for that. Can you go into a little more detail about how you assemble this charter document? How do you, let's start with the risks. Who decides, how do you gather the list of risks, potential risks together? And what do those risks sound like?
Well, so, I work really closely with our project teams, as I am over business improvement, the entire department and the whole road mapping process. I work very closely with them. And so that's something that I kind of lead them through because it is it's a fairly new thing for us as an organization. And so I do try to hold hands as much as possible to kind of lead them through that. But a lot of times it's just having a conversation. Like we put together those charter documents just by getting on a call and talking through like I said earlier about in a perfect world, if you were going to do this, what does it look like? How do you use it? Is it one click of a button and that's how simple it is? Is it 5 clicks? Is it input? Is it data entry input as well? That's just some of the things. In terms of the risk, I think probably one of the biggest risks that you'll probably always see is, low adoption, right? Like that's probably one of the biggest ones. because if you don't communicate it correctly, if you don't have the right people behind it, pushing it, it's probably not going to be successful. And so for me, I think that's probably one of the biggest risks that I normally start out with when we're going through that process. And of course, it's going to vary based on what project that you're doing. Like for instance, with business intelligence, with a business intelligence software product, one of those risks would be that we can't get the data that we need from the software companies that we use in order to aggregate the data and then build out reporting. We implemented a product a couple of years ago called HubSpot, which has been really, really great for us as well. But I'll tell you, there was a lot of things that we didn't realize that we needed to do on our end because we didn't really have this process set up at that time. And if we did, I think we would have been able to really foreshadow a lot of the things that we had to go through to get the product where we wanted it, and probably would have avoided a lot of the pain of getting through that by being able to, look at those risks, and then also being able to look at what are the key performance indicators on how this is successful. I think that that's probably one of the biggest things that I see missing, not only with our company, but in many of the companies I've worked for in the past. I think that a lot of times we come to the table to do something new and it sounds great, but we never take the time to take a step back and go, okay, for this to be successful, what does that look like? What does success look like now? What does success look like in a year? And if it doesn't, then what's the strategy from there?
That's a fantastic suggestion. I'm going to roll back to your discussion of adoption. Earlier in the discussion, you mentioned a couple of things that I think are key, which is to establish the why, the what's in it for the folks in the field. I think that's step one for sure. Even after you've done that and you don't see good adoption, talk about some strategies that you guys have employed to encourage people to use new technology. I'm going to say bluntly, like to punish. People get punished if they don't use your new BI platform and they don't send the new data over. Like, what are the carrots and sticks out there to encourage people to adopt a product?
I think that we try to be very supportive, and we know that, when we're asking someone to take on a new product, it is a big change, and especially with our on-site teams. I mean, I know coming from the on-site world and the operations world, I know how tough it can be to be on site and just manage the day-to-day. So when you're asking them to do something completely new, we try to have grace as much as we can. Like, one thing I will say is that if you ever feel that you're going to be able to get a project launch and have full adoption for your company, no matter if you have 10 employees or 1,000 employees, and you're going to be able to do that in a couple of months, there's no possible way. I would say that the average timeline is about 12 months for you to really be able to see the fruits of your labor and also be able to see at least a good adoption. I still don't think at 12 months you're going to see a full adoption, but as long as you're seeing the adoption increase month over month, then I think that you're heading in the right direction. Because listen, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? Just like people don't change in a day. So that's one thing that we try to do is just have grace, and then we try to meet them where they are. So one thing that we've done is we host calls, right? And we get on there and we say, hey, we want to hear what's happening, like what's frustrating, what's not working, what's broken, so that we can step in and fix it. And that's one thing that we've done with a lot of our projects is we normally will start a project and we'll do phase one, but then we also know that phase one is not the end, right? That's just the start. And we know that there's going to have to be iteration after iteration after iteration, just like with developing software, right? There's always going to be an iteration. So I think that's another thing that we've had to learn is that just because a project gets completed and implemented, it's really not ever gone, right? Because you've got to still keep up with it and make sure that it's being successful and that you're actually getting the ROI on it. But then also making changes as the industry changes and as your workforce changes.
What are the demands that you make of your software partners in this project? Where do they fit in on this in the various processes that you've described?
Yeah, so we actually work normally hand in hand with them, and we have them go through our process as well, just so that we're all on the same page. I think it's very beneficial because I know for me, one thing that I've seen is that sometimes we'll go to a vendor and we'll say, hey, this is what we want to do. We're not sure how to do it. We're not even sure specifically really what we want, but we know we needed to do this. And that, there are vendors that can figure things out like that. But if you take the time to put the planning in on the front end and really understand what you're asking for, your partners are much better suited to be able to help you in delivering. And we've seen that, we've done this now with a couple of our partners. And I'll tell you, the process has definitely gone much smoother because of that.
You mentioned KPIs. Those KPIs, I imagine, are also developed in partnership with your technology vendor. What are some examples of KPIs? I mean, ROI would be great. Not every software has a direct ROI. So how do you give maybe some examples of what you guys have considered as KPIs for software adoption?
Well, I think engagement is key, right? Adoption and engagement, to me, are two of the main factors. If no one's using the product, then we haven't done our job. If people are still confused and they're only doing certain things in the product, then we still haven't done our job. So I think those are two of the main ones. And then of course it's going to vary based on the project, right? Like from a business intelligence standpoint, the KPIs there are, have we been able to get all of the connections brought in? Is the data that we're actually seeing, is it clean data? If we're matching it up to the systems that we're bringing in from, does it actually tick and tie out? What are we trying to track there? So like, I know with one of the things that we're looking at is just like a weekly activity report. That's one thing that we've been building within our business intelligence product. And so, one of the KPIs there is just being able to look at overall property performance, right? Like what is the occupancy? What's our leasing velocity? What's our renewal velocity? And being able to look at that in a very simplistic way to where if there are problems, at a property, you're able to see that very quickly by a color-coded system. That's one thing that we've implemented just to make it a little bit easier. But that's just some of the things that we look at. But for me, I think adoption and engagement are two of the most crucial items to look at because you can get those numbers pretty easily. I love to have an ROI, but like you said, there's sometimes that you can't do that. But that's kind of my thought process on that.
So now, Devin, your challenge is to distill all of this down to a process that could be replicated by a smaller operator. How do you take all of this process and these different folks that have a say in the matter, and how would you distill this down to say, look, if you can do nothing else, if you're just a one-man show, not literally the whole organization, but if you're the only guy on the tech side making these decisions, controlling these deployments, what do you do? How would you do this?
Well, so when we built our process, I actually did a lot of research online and just, Google can be your best friend, right? Like going in and just looking up like simple project management templates, right? So I built a lot of our stuff just taking a look at some of those. I think probably the main thing that you can do, no matter what size of organization it is, before you move forward on a project, get all of the people that it's going to affect in the same room and have a conversation about, like I said in the very beginning, if we could wave a magic wand and make this happen for you, what would that look like? And listen, it may look different across the room, but that's going to at least give you a really good basis of how you're going to need to measure the performance of the product based on what your people are needing and wanting. I think, the more time that you can spend on the vetting process and really understanding specifically what you're wanting to do on the front end, it's going to help you tremendously on the back end.
Are there any resources that you know of that, there's a couple I can think of, but maybe because you do this every day. Are there any resources that you could point people to that give a good overview of kind of the different tech platforms that are in the industry right now? People don't know, like who even to call in to talk about their software. Like where do the people find that information?
Yeah, there's actually really not an aggregate place, I don't believe, at this moment. I do a lot of web searching and conference attendance and things like that. Of course, I get reached out to a lot by new vendors on the market just because of my role. But I don't really know if there's any specific resources. I think that one thing that I tend to do is, like, whenever I'm brought with a problem, I go to Google and I'm like, how are other companies solving for this problem, right? And a lot of times there you'll be able to find a product. It may not be industry specific, but then again, it could be industry specific. You know, like one of the things that we were looking at a couple of years ago was AI technology. And you know, we looked at the marketplace, and there really wasn't anything in the multifamily space for what we were looking to do. And so just a few simple Google searches, seeing how other companies were doing it, I was actually able to then find a product that would do the things that we wanted to do from an AI perspective, even a couple of years back. So I think that, you know, the knowledge base that's on the internet is really your best friend.
Cool. Well, boy, you were a little bit ahead of the game on the AI and on the AI front, and that's certainly that's a show unto itself. Like how that's changing every day. I'm sure you guys are having a lot of fun waving your magic wand for AI has never been a more entertaining exercise, I'm sure.
Yes, I can't wait to see what's happening with that. Yeah, more to come on that. That's something we're definitely looking into. That's going to be probably more for next year, really diving into what we can do with that. But even just the simplistic things of like on site, one things that we've talked to our people about is use the AI technology to help you do your job easier, right? Like go on there, and if you're needing a resident letter, go in there and type in a few prompts, see what it comes up with. It's really amazing the time saving that you would see just for simple tasks, social media postings, resident letters, communications, company-wide communications. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do with the AI, and there's a lot of great resources out there that will tell you, give you a lot of information on the prompts and things like that. Something I really enjoy. I really love the technology side of what I do. So the AI really gets me pumped up. I'm pretty excited about what's to come with that.
As it should. I don't remember if you covered at the beginning. Pegasus third-party management, owner, operator. Which
we are 100% third-party management.
Yeah. So then the last thing I want to cover is you go through all this process. You identify great technology, like this will be help our teams in the field. Everyone's bought in, and now you have to. Typically these are pass-through costs to the owner. They're typically not borne by the management. I mean, on a rare occasion that happens. So now, how do you sell this to your clients? Like this is something that will make all our lives easier and make you more. Tell me how that happens. How do you get buy-in from your clients?
Yeah. So I think what we end up doing first off is we tend to do a demo group, right? Like we do a very select set of communities. Normally we try to use a whole different types of communities, right? Like A, B, C, different markets, things like that, to test out a product before we go all in for the company. And then from there, we're able to really look at the stats. I'm really a data person. I really like to know like what's happening behind the scenes. What is this creating for us? And then from there, we're able to create white papers and graphics. We're very fortunate to have an in-house marketing agency. So that's one way that we really tend to sell it to our clients is we, go to our marketing agency and say, hey, here's what we're wanting to do. Here's the stats. How can we package this so that it's really, really persuasive for the clients to utilize? Looking at the pricing, a lot of times we try to use video because video seems to do really well just because, that's a little bit nicer than just a static image. But yeah, I mean, we try to sell it to our clients. We also go through and we try to train our leaders on how to have those conversations. One thing that I found in my career with clients is, clients really want to understand all of the backup and they want the proof of the pudding, right? Before they're going to be able to make a decision. They also want to be able to trust that you're giving them the proper recommendation. So as long as you come in with the backup data and you're able to hold your own in a conversation, I've not had an experience in my career where I've not been able to, get a client to at least try something. If you go in and you are the subject matter expert for property management, you have to own that, and you have to know your facts and make sure you're 2 steps ahead, because we have clients today are very, very involved. And so if you're not 2 steps ahead of them, then it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to get things, new things done. I think also just going in and saying, hey, this is going to cost $2 and this is an AI product, we need to add it. That doesn't really work, right? They have to understand what's in it for them, just like we talked about with our associates on the internal front. We have to understand that, hey, like if we add this, we're going to be able to cut back in this area, which is going to save X number of dollars. Or if we're going to be able to see a 10% increase in resident retention, which is going to equate to X number of dollars in rental income over the next 12 months. I've always found that if you can speak in numbers, that's owner's language. And if you can do that, you're 90% of the way there to getting their buy-in.
Yeah, totally agree. That all sounds wonderful. Is there any pearl of wisdom I have not extracted from you yet that if you could share one more thing, if you could wave a magic wand and fix something about the technology process in our business or the way people adopt technology, is there any pearl of wisdom you want to share here in our parting minutes?
Yeah, I think that the one thing that I would share is that if you do start working in anything with project management and with technology rollouts and things like that, I think it's very important to not beat yourself up if things don't tend to go exactly the way you planned, because sometimes it needs a recalibration and it needs you to rethink it, and actually you'll end up probably getting a better result on the back end from it. That's one thing I think that we've done well as a company is like, listen, we've not done them all, perfect, right? Like there's just no possible way. So I think that just owning those imperfections and learning from them and trying to grow from them is a huge thing. And then my other piece of wisdom is that for me, I just can't wait to see an all-in-one product that comes out that can literally do everything that we need to manage a property from start to finish. Like whoever can come up with that is going to be very, very wealthy.
Well, it will take a while for things to coalesce probably into one product, but it has been the pattern of the large PMS platforms either gobbling up or replicating great products that come out on the market that are point solutions on their own right. So it does seem to be the trend. Do you, in the interim though, would you say that best of breed trumps one single source solution, or would you rather just use one thing even if it were inferior in a number of ways?
I think it would be according to the product and what were the shortcomings. I think that, one of the things that we look at when we're doing projects is like, what are our must-haves? Like, what are the things that we can't negotiate on? So if there was, some things on the inferior product that were non-negotiables, then I would absolutely say that we should just go with just whatever's best in class. I think for me, one of the other things that we try to look for is, what are the integration points? Does it have open source API to where we can connect other things into it, where it's not necessarily one specific, product, but can the products talk to each other? That's one thing that we try to really look for because, there isn't a product out there today that can do all of it in one. So that's kind of what we do.
All right, Professor Harvey, I think we may rebrand this the master class in technology evaluation and adoption. We'll start our own series here with you at the forefront. So thank you so much for your time, and we packed a lot of information into this time. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you for joining us at this week's episode of the Apartment Academy podcast. The Apartment Academy is a production of Leonardo 24/7, the industry's leader in multifamily operations and maintenance software. At Apartment Academy, we realize the hard work that goes into property management and the stress that comes along with it. Leonardo 24/7 takes the guesswork out of your team's day-to-day by providing customized daily guidance on tasks that need to be done, guaranteeing consistent operations across your entire portfolio. To learn more, visit www.leonardo247.com today.